method that helps a woman avoid or achieve a pregnancy, but can also be used to identify potential health problems and can help guide those struggling with infertility. You can sign up for either of these classes on our website at birthpoint.com.
The resurrection of Jesus inspires us to embrace hope, love, and transformation in our lives. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul. Thanks for listening to KATH 910 AM, Frisco, Dallas, Fort Worth, and North Texas on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Catholic radio for your soul. Heard also at grnonline.com and on your smartphone.
Welcome to The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Join us as we journey together on this pilgrimage of faith. And now your host, Monsignor Charles Pope.
And it is I, Monsignor Pope. Well, we certainly need to talk about another Pope, a new Pope, Leo XIV. But we will do that today. But we're also going to talk a little bit about the readings for this coming Sunday, some of the stuff in the news. So we'll spend our second segment certainly on the Pope. And if you want to call and extend that conversation, I'm open to that. So we want to make sure that you call. Matthew, help me out with the number.
Yeah, you can give us a call at 877-757-9424. That's 877-757-9424. And
have you recovered from all the riveting television, looking at the Pope coming out on the...
No, I've not recovered at all, and I've actually been doing both the Quest and Morning Joy this week. So I've been, it's been one heck of a week in Catholic radio, is all I'll say.
Yeah.
But it's,
I was down actually at TAN Publications on yesterday when the announcement. I was down there with them in their warehouse, their offices, and that was among friends, and we. I was frankly, I'll be honest with you, I was concerned when it came in so quickly. I thought, oh gosh, that sounds like a lot of Vatican insiders and must have, But at the end of the day, we all took some, well, who do you think it'll be? So we waited for about an hour. And not one of us said Prévost. Prevost, we not one of us. And again, we just excluded him because he was an American, just impossible. Yeah. Never happened.
Well, I think the other thing is like, I could probably list 10 American cardinals, and he's like nowhere on my radar. You'd think, we get the first American cardinal, it's going to be, Sean O'Malley or Dolan or Wilton Gregory, someone that you've heard of. And nope, surprise. So it's interesting. Well, I know we need to pray for the Pope, so let's kick things off with prayer, if you don't mind.
Yeah. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. For Pope Leo XIV, Lord, we pray. And boy, I can't imagine what his life is like right now. Just a whirlwind swept up into everybody else's schedule, led around by staff and everyone who says what he's going to do. So help him, Lord. We pray for him. He's got a lot of work to do to unite us, and so we thank you. We ask you to give him those graces to bring together a very divided church at this point, and help to do that in a way that's, Lord, gentle but also clear. Okay, we say these prayers in the name of Jesus, who's Lord forever and ever. All right. Now I want to look at the readings first of all for this coming Sunday, which has been our habit on these Friday shows. Matthew, do you want to say a word? Are we going to begin to kind of change the format of these Friday shows, or what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, obviously not today, not next Friday, but the following Friday, the week of May 19th, we're going to be going to a all-live format. So we won't be having Father Cedric's pre-recorded episodes on Monday, and Madigan will be joining Father Sam on Monday instead. We'll continue with the rotating priest on Thursday. You'll be on as usual on Tuesday and Friday, but on Fridays you'll also be with Madigan. So we want to give people more opportunity to speak with priests. A lot of people have a hard time accessing good and faithful priests. So it's kind of a service to the church and to the world that we're trying to do here. So that'll be the plan. But you'll be hearing a lot about it. And speaking of other things you're hearing a lot about, we have the big 25th anniversary happening in Plano, Texas. So if you can go to GRN, and I know you'll be there, I'll be there, and boy, the whole GRN family will be there. So please join us in July for that.
Yes. All right. Well, now, as far as our readings, this is what we often call Good Shepherd Sunday. And in the old Latin rite, that was last Sunday. So if you go to the old Latin Mass, you say, well, that was last Sunday. But in the new rite, we tend to follow this on the fourth Sunday. And so we have some, okay, the Lord is risen from the dead. Now what? Well, we need to let him be our shepherd, to lead us, to guide us. And so on this fourth Sunday, we spend time reflecting on what does it mean to be sheep? What does it mean to have Jesus be our shepherd? So, I think, why does the Lord call us his sheep? Are you a little bit indignant about that? Can you get a little bit upset about it? Sheep? Really? Sheep? That the best you got? Do you have any, maybe, how about a gazelle? Or a mighty horse or lion? Nope, sheep. Sheep, that's the one. And so what are some aspects of sheep that we should be aware of? First of all, the negative ones. Now, one of them would be that sheep are wayward. They tend to wander, in other words. Sheep will graze for a while and just kind of wander off, and all of a sudden look up and say, where am I? So he doesn't know how to get back to the fold unless the shepherd goes out and calls them back, using the sheepdogs and so on. So, again, we tend, as human beings, to also be very wayward. And I think it's, sadly to say, it's an apt image. So we tend to wander off, get all involved in stuff, to sit up our head and say, where am I going with my life? We have no idea half the time. So I got news for you. The fact that sheep are, first of all, wayward animals describes us pretty well. They're also pretty witless. Sheep are not that smart. We can train dogs and birds and horses, even lions, but you don't hear about trained sheep. And, we human sheep like to think we're so smart. We've been to the moon and we've been back, and we have all this advanced technology, but too many of us aren't even bright enough to pray every day, aren't even smart enough to go to Mass or follow God's basic directions for life. And so we're so witless that we don't even, know, that we do things that we know will harm us, and we don't do things that will bless us. So again, we're kind of dumb, witless, and so on. I got a feeling, Matthew, you got something to add here. I see by your look. Oh, sorry, you got to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm always with the facial expressions behind the scenes. I'm just thinking of my chickens and how unsmart my chickens are, and how that would be the perfect analogy of how silly and wayward we are ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good thing though, to raise chickens. It really is. That's earthy, man. That's cool. My nieces and nephews do that too. Yeah, their parents, my brother and sister-in-law, like to keep them with their hand on earthy things. Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm. So sheep are not, so first of all, sheep are wayward. They are witless. Sheep are also weak. Sheep have no way really to protect themselves. The mules can kick, and cats can scratch, and dogs can bite, rabbits can run, and skunks, well, we all know what they can do. But at the end of the day, old sheep, he just stands there and waits to get killed. In fact, sometimes they got too much, wool. They'll fall over and need someone to pick them back up. So, and we have to say this is true with us too. If it were not for the care of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, we'd be cornered by this world, the flesh and the devil. We like to think we're so strong, and we have armies and political power and monetary power. But at the end of the day, the slightest temptation can carry us off. So, in other words, we're like sheep. We don't stand a chance if it isn't for Jesus. So these are some of the negative aspects of sheep that I think we can sort of bring into the picture here. Now, On the other hand, though, let's look at some good qualities of sheep. The sheep are worthwhile. In fact, in Jesus' day, many people counted their wealth by the number of the sheep they owned. Shepherds made many sacrifices to breed, herd, and protect these valuable animals. They provided meat, yes, but also before that, milk and wool. And so it is with us. At times we may not feel worthy, but apparently we were worth saving because the Lord paid the price for our redemption. And he knew the price, and he paid it all. So we are worthwhile. So are sheep, worthwhile animals. Sheep also have this smartness about them. They walk together. They flock, as we say. They gather in a flock, and they're safer that way. To be solitary sheep is very dangerous. I'm going to say it. The wolf comes, and he says, woo, that sheep is just sitting there all by himself, and but in the flock, they're more protected. Are you and I that smart? A lot of people think, well, I just go off and do my own thing. Nobody tells me what to do. Don't need family. Don't need extended family. Don't need the government. Don't need anything. Certainly don't need the church. Well, again, but in their best moments, sheep, as I say, walk together. Walk together. Also, sheep are wary. It says, he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him, the gatekeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by his name, and he leads them out. But when he's brought all of them out that are his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. So again, a stranger they won't follow, but they'll flee from him because they don't know his voice. Are you smarter than a sheep? In other words, we too easily hear other voices that are clearly not Jesus, and we say, well, tell me more. Whereas at least a sheep will say, that's not my shepherd, and they'll run. Be smarter than a sheep. Okay, well, we'll have to end there, but at the end of the day, these are some images from our readings this coming Sunday. When we return, we're going to talk a little bit about our new Pope and what we do know and don't know, all right? So that'll take place when we return after the break.
Catholic radio was there for me when I needed it. Even though I didn't think I needed it, it was there for me. I want everybody to know that I'm giving, not so that I can sit there and say that I gave to GRN for any other reason but this. I want that radio station to be there for anyone else who needs it also. They may not think they need it, but it's going to be there for them, whether it's in the future, whether it's right now. I want that radio station to always be there for them, just like it was there for me.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Hi, I'm Adam Bly, here with Debbie Georgiani from The Spirit World.
After 2 weeks of truly wonderful guest interviews, Adam and I are very eager to get back to your calls.
This weekend's episode is our open forum for the month of May. Deb and I are ready to answer your questions about angels, demons, saints, or anything in the spiritual world.
And since May is the month of Mary, this is a great time for you to share your questions about the Blessed Virgin Mary.
So listen on Saturday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to The Quest, an extraordinary journey where every step brings us closer to discovering God's love for us. Want to join the conversation? Give us a call at 877-757-9424.
Okay, and we're all back, and I think we have a lot of us were pinned to our TVs yesterday, if we could get to the one, if we weren't at work or somewhere outside. But we saw the new Pope announced, and as I mentioned earlier, I was with some friends down at Can Publications for my new book, The Hell There Is, and but it was a magnificent moment and a shocking moment. I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect good news when I heard that the conclave had wrapped up so quickly. And my reason for that was I thought, well, a lot of insiders probably, had the whole thing figured out. A lot of the cardinals from the, quote, peripheries were probably not heard from much, and they were kind of overwhelmed. But anyway, all my concerns about who that might mean, every one of us in that room, not one of us said Provost. Cardinal Prevost would be the one, because we just excluded it because he was an American. Well, surprise. And there's a lesson in that. We can return to that in a minute. But I would also say that a lot of I know you've been reading lots of things on the internet, for and against, and you'll get, hopeful, and then suddenly desolation will come to you because you read something he said somewhere about something. Be careful. Let me just use myself as an example. I'm a complicated figure. I say the old Latin Mass, and I love it. I also say the new Mass, and I love it. In fact, I say a form of the new Mass that often involves gospel music. Oh, look at him, he's clapping his hands and standing. And yet I'm still your beloved priest, and a very doctrinaire I am. But the point is that I think all of us are complicated figures, and please allow the new Pope to be that. He may say something about Donald Trump, and a lot of people have strong opinions one way or the other about the president. But at the end of the day, he also says other things. It is said, and I don't know, I heard these things said, I don't know if it's true or not, but that he occasionally would say the old Latin Mass by request, as do I, So anyway, but all that said, you're going to hear one thing or the other and go here and there and back and forth. Just wait it out. Let him begin to set forth his papacy, and we'll respond as kind. So what are your thoughts, Matthew, before I go any further?
Well, I think like I said to you earlier, I know so many American cardinals that if someone was going to be the first American cardinal to become Pope, I was shocked that it's someone who I pretty much hadn't really ever heard of. Maybe I'd seen his name or something, but I knew zero about him. So that was a real shock. I know why, people in other countries don't want Americans, because we kind of come across as, loud and abrasive, and, we're sort of like a superpower, and who wants to have the superpowers?
We're the best.
It's influence in the Vatican. So I absolutely never expected an American. My initial thoughts is I was really impressed by his choice of name.
Yes.
Because, as an Augustinian, he very easily could have been Pope Augustine, but he chose Leo. He chose Leo on purpose, and so I think that there's connotations there. He's kind of like setting up what he, and that's a subject. If you want to talk about that, I can go off on a whole large tangent about that. Just the name part itself, and what I think might be behind there. But I know on Tuesday, you're going to sort of take a look at what all the pundits are saying, because I don't know if you're on like social media like I am, but the algorithms know that I like Catholic media, and so I'm just bombarded with every spectrum of Catholicism and everybody's opinion and everyone's insights into everything. Yeah. And some people I trust more than others, and so I've gone to see sort of what their takes are. I enjoyed Christine Niles' take, and I enjoyed Jimmy Akin's take, and a couple others. But there really is a spectrum of the people who are so angry, and he's so dangerous, and this is such a horrible choice. There's the whole spectrum of people who are filled with hope and see this as a really positive sign. But time will tell. There's some things we know about him.
Roraticelli is not known for being, shall we say, they're fairly right wing.
Yeah.
They said kind of, hey, hang in there. Let's learn more. And I don't know if they posted since what I read yesterday, but even they were saying, let's go slow with this. This is complicated.
Yeah, I'm a pray hope and don't worry type of guy. So that's
Padre Pio.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of the approach I take on everything spiritual and non-spiritual as well, actually. But we'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
Can you give us our phone number one more time?
Yeah. It's 877-757-9424. That number is 877-757-9424. Don't fear that you're going to miss out on the show. When you're on hold, you're listening to the show. So I know there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and we'd certainly love to hear your first impressions on that. So feel free to give us a call. But what did you think of the name choice?
Well, I think it's an interesting, if you want to talk about, I think, what's going on for us here in the church, a good bridge name, there's some bridge building going on. I think both conservatives and liberals in the church, to just use those political terminology, would say that they can buy into some of Leo XIII. Leo was maybe on what we call today more the left side of the aisle, very, very into workers' rights, working conditions, the basic, what we've come to call social justice. Hint to the reader, though, all justice is social. But anyway, social teachings, maybe we could say. He's at the heart of a lot of it. And our modern sense of justice in the workplace, justice among nations, and so on. And Leo was certainly there, but he was also very straightforward with many teachings about sexuality, the family, and so on. He was also, of course, the Pope who had a vision of the satanic attack on the church and gave us the St. Michael prayer. He, I often use the Leonine prayers, we call them in the exorcism community, to exorcise buildings or places. And so, again, he's one of the finest Latinists the church has had in a long, long time. He was a great Latinist. So anyway, I mean, all these are just ways of saying, I think he appeals to both sides in different ways. So I think that makes sense that he would pick that name. And I also, when I look at him, I see that we don't know what he thinks about a lot of issues, and I'm all for that too. In that, I could use a little discretion at this point. We've been through several papacies now where, everything that they thought about every issue is kind of articulated. Maybe we could use a little discreetness now, and let's focus on things of the faith and not be too involved in every single political issue that's out there,
Well, we just had a pope who said he wanted to make a mess of things, right? And I think he did do that. I think he was well-intentioned with the concept of making a mess because he wanted to kind of shake things up and improve things, from his perspective. But I don't think that the mess has benefited the church. So I sort of see him more as a unifier. I mean, that is my hope. I don't know. But, I don't think he's going to take the same approach. He has already said he's not replacing anyone in any positions as of yet. He's going to just kind of sit back. I mean, I think that's very common. And pray about it all. So that makes sense to me. Yeah. One of the things that really stood out was, and I'm sure you certainly know the proper name for it, but the red and gold vestments that the Pope wears. Pope Francis, when he came out on the balcony, he was just kind of in white. And Pope Leo seems to have gone back to the images that are in my mind of Benedict and John Paul II, was sort of that traditional red papal garb.
Mozetto, I think they call it.
Mozetto, that's the word I've been trying to come up with. Yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I think, people attributed a great amount of significance to Pope Francis not wearing that. But I can only say that what we can say, I think, is that, okay, if you're going to say that, then I guess you can say there's great significance that it was worn. But all that said, I think it's a kind of a humility. There's two different ways to look at the humility. Francis, I want to get rid of all these showy things. And that's maybe one kind of humility, but another kind of humility, say, well, look, this is what people expect. This is the role, this is the office I'm in, and so I'll humbly accept that even if I don't like to wear all this stuff, I'll go ahead and wear it anyway, So there's two different ways to look at the humility. Listen, this just once again calls, I really want to know what you all think, 877-757-9424. Okay, so call us, 877-757-9424. Only Madigan gets calls, Matthew. I don't get many calls. I know.
Well, if you're very timid, you can comment on YouTube. We can see it there. You can email us, thequest@grn.org. on grnonline.com. It's not like he brought back the papal tiara.
No. And the capamania.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been a real shock to people. No one would have known what to think of it. But, I thought it was interesting. He picks a name that's like a sort of a pre-Vatican II name, right? He could have gone with John the 24th or Paul the 7th or John Paul III or something. So that was interesting. But I'm suspecting social justice will play a role in his...
As it should.
In his approach. I think there's a real need for understanding the proper understanding of social justice. That it is Catholic. It's been a hijacked term. So I'd like to restore back to that. Pope Leo. We're assuming Pope Leo XIII is the reason he chose the name, but he hasn't said that. So it could be Pope Leo the Great for all we know. But Pope, assuming it's 13th, he really wanted to fight the darkness in the world. And so I'm assuming that's going to play a role in his papacy as well. And finally, I'm very curious about, it seems he's sort of like a little bit of more of an open borders type of person. But as far as I know, Pope Leo XIII had a lot to say about private property. So I'm very curious to see what his approach to those sort of, lesser theological sort of questions will be.
Well, then, if he is open borders, I invite him to tear down the walls of the Vatican. Anyway, but all that said, all those things get into all that stuff that's, like I say, reasonable people differ over, But hopefully, his discretion, the fact that so few people know really where he stands. So you'll read one article that says, James Martin's happy as can be. And you'll go into desolation, or you'll hear that he apparently may have said the Latin Mass privately for a while, the old Latin Mass. Oh, now all of a sudden you're exalted, and then you hear another thing. Try not to do that. Some of these things are true, some are not. Some, we don't always know when they were. There's a lot of factors. So let it unfold. Let it be. Let's just wait and see, and pray. I just can't imagine. That poor guy woke up. I say guy, but I mean the Pope woke up this morning. Okay, we have 50 appointments today. Here they are. No. You're going to go here. You will say this. You will do that. You will do this. You will be so and so and so and so and so and so. Can I retire yet? I can't imagine. His life.
And that could go on 15, 20 years for him because he's, relatively young guy.
Relatively.
He might be with us for quite a while.
Sure. 69, right?
Correct,
yeah. Just a few years older than I am. So I know I don't have the energy to be Pope. I haven't aged gracefully, though, Matthew. I've aged disgracefully. At any rate, but, okay, well, listen, let's pray for Pope Leo XIV. And get used to hearing his name in the canon of the Mass. All right, when we return, we're going to talk a little bit about the African-American community in Cincinnati and their concerns about church closings.
This is a special Life News Radio offering a look at Cardinal Prevost's past words on the life issue. I'm Jim Anderson. Robert Francis Cardinal Prevost, now named Pope Leo XIV, brings with him a long line of life-affirming sermons detailed at lifenews.com. After years of mission work and teaching, as Bishop of Chiclayo, Peru in 2019, he said, "We cannot build a just society if we discard the weakest, whether the child in the womb or the elderly in their frailty, for they are both gifts from God." As a fully adopted Peruvian in 2020, he told his fellow bishops, "Our elderly are not to be discarded, but cherished as bearers of wisdom and faith, deserving the same love and protection as the youngest among us." This is Life News Radio. 2 years ago, in his first-year address leading the world's bishops, Cardinal Prevost encouraged them to be shepherds who defend the sanctity of life, ensuring no one, neither the unborn nor the aging, is left without the Church's love and protection. His episcopal comments in the latest synod recognize the dignity of life from the womb to the end of life, as this is the heart of Christ's mission. Addressing Rome's Albano diocese near the Appian Way just this year, Cardinal Prevost, now Pope Leo, proclaimed from the pulpit, God's mercy calls us to protect every life, especially those society overlooks, the child yet to be born and the elderly nearing their journey's end, because each bears Christ's face. We will learn more about Pope Leo in the weeks and years to come and receive more from this missionary from Chicago. Let us pray that we and our neighbors will be fertile soil, even on the life issue, for the mission of Pope Leo XIV. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been a special Life News Radio.
You're listening to The Quest, a pilgrimage of faith. Have a question or something to share? Call the show live at 877-757-9424.
Okay, we're back, and I hope, I don't know if all of our affiliates heard the life update that we just heard, but I think there we have a lot of information that the new Pope is certainly pro-life, and as we would expect, as it was Pope Francis. But again, all these things are just, again, ways we're trying to figure out who is our new Pope. And one of the ways certainly is that he's very strong on the life issue, so bless the Lord. All right, we have a phone call that's come in, and that's good. I want to talk with you some, extend this topic of the new Pope. I don't know if that's what it's about, but let's go ahead.
Yeah, we have Ida from San Antonio calling. Go ahead, Ida.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Monsignor.
Hello.
Hi. What hit me yesterday, or maybe today, I've been kind of looking at them, interviewing his family, his brothers, and the older one is still, kind of still in shock, I guess, the way the rest of us are, that we have an American Pope, and yet so excited. But one of the things he said that struck me, he said, well, I guess he's going to be doing this for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And you don't think about the family, of the men who become Pope, whereas maybe before he could come home for a holiday or Christmas, he probably can't anymore.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me a whole different perspective, We're excited and just kind of to know that.
I got into a little...
His brothers were a little bit different. One was really excited, and the other one's been kind of reserved, and he's the one who said, he's been doing this for the rest of his life. So
you're right. Consider that how many people at age 70 are embarking on an entirely new aspect of their life. Most people are saying, time to retire, time to begin to look at maybe, if it's new, it's going to be more like ramped down. And yet this man is at almost age 70, going to have to completely change everything in his life. Yeah. So do pray for that. I mean, I'm sensitive to that. I'm in my mid-60s now, and I'm like, wow, I hope they don't have any big new things.
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I guess both of us are saying, I hope life isn't going to dish out to me something completely brand new. I'd kind of like to be on the glide slope to retiring and, keeping things a little simpler. But so there you have it. So I think you're right. And also go ahead, you. Yeah.
I'm also praying for his protection. Because he's American and our media, is all over the place. And, just to protect him from all of that and from his family, eventually, hopefully the hounding will go away and they'll be able to,
kind of get back to
be excited about their brother being and son being a pope. So But thank you. I love watching this or listening to the show on my way home every day. So.
Well, good. God bless you. Thanks for calling and for listening.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Monsignor.
Bless your heart. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, as I say, things continue on in the church here in our various different dioceses. In Cincinnati, the African American churches are expressing concern over an archdiocesan restructuring plan. Now, what I want to say about this is that I'm the pastor of a traditionally African American community, but we have similar issues here in our diocese. But let me read you the information and let's talk a little bit. African American Catholic Church communities in Cincinnati are concerned that their archdiocesan restructuring program to address declining mass attendance, etc., means that parishes have to close, and this would jeopardize the heart of the Black Catholic life in the city. All right, historically, African American communities have relied on specific parishes not only for spiritual nourishment, but also cultural identity and social cohesion. So what they're saying there is there's a very distinct form of preaching, teaching, and liturgy. Gospel music tends to be, well, let's just call it charismatic. I think the rest of the church, clapping of the hands and raising of hands, these things are what most people call charismatic. The black community just calls it church. But anyway, when neighborhoods are split apart, African American parishes lost the very people and families that sustained them. It wasn't just the breaking up of homes, it was the beginning of a spiritual and cultural unraveling that we're still trying to meet today. All right, now let me stop for a minute and talk to you about, I have to say, for all of us, I'm not talking African American here, I'm talking about all of us. Some of you have ethnic communities, some of you, and some of us have all these different things. Look, bishops don't close parishes. Parishes close parishes. Now, what I mean by that is I'm not talking legally, but I think that we all have to accept. I'm very concerned here in Washington, for example. I've been most of my priesthood pastor of African American parishes, and they're beautiful. Their liturgy, I've really learned, but I got to tell you, nobody wanted to talk about the fact that they're getting smaller and smaller, and older and older. Well, 10 years ago, I tried to start a thing called the Mission in Motion Project to try to bring 12 parishes, African American, together to kind of work together and build each other up. Because some of us, like my parish or St. Augustine's and others, and St. Joseph's were large communities and had resources. Others were just very small and didn't have the kind of resources. So let's do marriage prep, let's do retreats, let's do, these kinds of things together. And it was hard to do. And the pastors finally couldn't come together. And it didn't work. But as I say, I think nobody seemed to notice that, hey, the youth group are people in their 60s. And little by little, we got older and older, and nobody wanted to talk about it. And I want to just say, I'm not sure of all the situations in Cincinnati, but I want to just say that all of us have to acknowledge it's not just the bishop's fault, or the bishop is doing something, or the diocese. We have to say that, what have we done to grow the parish? What have we done to keep it solvent? What have we done to repair the roof? All the stuff you need to do. And I think sometimes we lose that. It's not just African Americans, it's any parish that's getting close to being closed. You have old Polish parishes in some places. You have old, Italian parishes. All these things are very, very common. And so I think what I want to say is that we have to collectively, not just blame, but collectively accept responsibility for what's going on. Little parishes can no longer sustain, and at some point they can't repair and they can't close. They can't do. They can't even afford a pastor. And little by little, these buildings become, well, it's my personal memory. I like this church. Okay, fine, but what do you like it enough to fill it up with new faces and things? Oh, no. Anyway, Matthew, you take over for a minute. Tell me what you think.
Sure. Well, you pointed to a couple things that I think about, which I think about the Polish communities that I know and the Vietnamese communities, who they have something beautiful. The African American community in the Catholic Church is very unique, and it's beautiful. I think it's a gem of the church.
It is.
But these communities need to reach these these churches need to reach out into their communities. And they need to bring people in the doors.
Yeah.
And they need to have a connection with the local community. I've said it before, if all of a sudden your parish were to close, and
but he noticed.
would anyone in the neighborhood notice? And I'm always saying, have sort of these cultural events. I want to do all the Catholic things, like a Eucharistic procession, and bring that out in the community. But at the same time, it's like if you have all these old ladies who know how to do amazing cooking, or canning, or some of these lost arts and skills that all the young hip kids are into all of a sudden. A lot of these churches and their parish halls, they have licensed kitchens. So like bring the community in for a free event and just get them in the doors and see that it's not that scary to be inside the church, or have a musical event.
Yeah.
So
we
yeah,
do that here a lot. We have the Army Band and Christmas.
Yeah.
Some concerts and things that everybody can come to.
Because the church has to grow to sustain itself, and if there's no growth, then there's no future. And I hate seeing any of these buildings get turned into art galleries or coffee shops. Mercy. It just completely breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So we really need to figure out a way to work with them and to do more.
Yeah. I think I want to talk next week sometime about, on this show, about a very sad experience in my life about a church I used to say Mass at that's now been turned into a bar. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that later. But listen, I want to also say this. I think that dioceses could do a better job in saying to communities or parishes that are beginning to struggle, let's help you for a few years, but at the end of the day, if we have to close this parish, you are free. The building is yours. And canon law, backs this up. The building is yours. You can decide if you want to keep it repaired and keep it as a place of prayer. And so on. I can't supply you a priest or whatever, but you're certainly welcome. I think there's this anger that sets up. We all want to blame somebody or have angry, someone to shake the fist at a little bit because our parish is closing. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say it again: dioceses and bishops don't close parishes. People do. They stop coming. They always expected to be there for the funeral or for the other need that might arise. But at the end of the day, it's really about people filling the pews and paying the bills. And I think a bishop a diocese could do better to say to them, it is your building. These are your buildings. You can convert them into a public or a charter school. You can convert the church over, to a kind of a shrine or a place of prayer, but at the end of the day, we can no longer, send a priest or send you lots of financial aid, but it really is, they're your buildings, you can use them. I think that would get rid of this idea that bishops are closing a place, or so on. So I would go, probably in that general direction.
Can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. What do you think about, with the priest shortage, some of these churches that can't have active pastors anymore, what do you think about the idea of like a deacon coming in and sort of like being responsible for the community in a sense, and facilitating a priest to come in and do mass from time to time, but offering night prayer or some sort of like counseling services, or even a women's religious community coming in, and maybe they can live in the rectory or come in and retain the building as a religious building, but not necessarily an active parish.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's all great. The only thing I wouldn't want to do is have regular communion. They call them communion services.
I agree with you.
And I think what we want to do is link the Eucharist to the priesthood and the need to pray for priestly vocations. And
absolutely.
Yeah, but other than that, no, I think all those other things you said, that makes perfect sense. And I just think that bishops need to do a better job. Bishops, I say, maybe dioceses, of saying to the people, they are your buildings. What are you going to do to repair this roof and keep these things so that, and if they can't and they won't, well, we can't help you either because we don't have the money. So we'll close it, but the buildings are yours. You decide if you want to sell them. Unfortunately, a lot of dioceses step in, and the impression is that they sell they're selling these buildings to make money, to pay off lawsuits, or there's a lot of anger that goes to that. And I think we have to say that canon law actually does not even permit that. Whatever monies, if they do sell the properties, go with the people to the parish where they're asked to, relocate. It does not belong to the diocese. It belongs to the people. Okay. Well, look, when we return, we're going to take a quick look at the questions of, there's a problem of the seal of confession out in the state of Washington, just to revisit that again. So when we return.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for May 9th. Today we celebrate St. John of Avila. Born in 1500 in the Castile region of Spain, at age 14, John was sent to the University of Salamanca to study law. Later he studied philosophy and theology in Alcala before his ordination as a diocesan priest. As his parents' sole heir, John received a considerable fortune upon their deaths, which he immediately distributed to the poor. John traveled to Seville, hoping to become a missionary to Mexico. However, Seville's archbishop persuaded John to remain and minister to the inhabitants of Andalusia. Over the next 9 years, John earned a reputation as an engaging preacher, a perceptive spiritual director, and a wise confessor. Not afraid to denounce vice in high places, John was investigated by the Inquisition, but later cleared. He counted among his friends such saints as Francis Borgia, Ignatius Loyola, John of God, John of the Cross, Peter of Alcantara, and Teresa of Avila. John worked closely with the Society of Jesus, helping it to grow both in Spain and in the Spanish colonies. John of Avila died in 1569, was canonized in 1970, and named a Doctor of the Church in 2012. His mystical writings have been translated into several languages. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Share the show with a friend. You can find us on social media. Want to listen again? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, the free Guadalupe Radio app, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
All right, we're back, and with all the things in the news, I think one of the things that kind of got a little buried is that in Washington State, they have now, in effect, said to the priests of the who live in that state, you will, under pain of civil punishment, report any child abuse that's reported to you in the confessional. All right, well, so what do we got there? What's going on? Okay, so let's take a look at that. I would say this much. All the bishops of Washington State, which are not a huge number, but they have all come together and said, ignore the law, break it, it's not a just law. And I want to try to spend a little time explaining why that is. But first of all, let me remind you what canon law says. This isn't actually canon law, but it's an interpretation of it. A priest, therefore, cannot break the seal of the confessional even to save his own life, or to protect his good name, or to refute accusations against him, or even to save the life of someone else. He cannot be compelled by law to disclose a person's confession, or be bound by any oath he takes. For example, as a witness in a court trial. Now, canon law says that if a priest does violate the seal of confession, he incurs an automatic excommunication, loses his priestly faculties, and that's reserved to the Pope in Rome to lift that. Canon 1388 and so on. Okay, now, why? Some people say, well, come on, man. I mean, a priest should be able to talk about child sexual abuse and report a person. And I'm just going to say to you, just be careful and think through this with me for a moment. First of all, if I'm able to break the seal for this little situation or that, no, not little, but this situation or that situation, I can break it for any number of things the government says you got to break it. I'm sorry to say, a person's soul is more important than their body or imprisonment or any other thing. So what we want to do is to be able to have the confessional be a complete sanctuary for even the worst of sinners to come and at least save their soul. And I'm sorry to, a lot of people don't get this because we don't think about the soul today. We just think of our life here in this world. But there's a life to come. And I need to be able to draw people out of the jaws of hell, so they don't spend eternity there, in such a way that nothing will get between me and the penitent or them coming to confession. I might advise that, a person, I would certainly advise a person who's committed some kind of crime, whether it's child sexual abuse or murder, or to report themselves to the authority. But at the end of the day, if I start saying, well, I'm going to turn you in with all these, let's just say 3 or 4 or 5 and probably a growing list of other things, then the confessional just goes empty and we've lost the whole purpose, which is to save souls from hell. Do you understand? Forgiveness and mercy are at the heart of what we do. So I want to say that do not just fall into this idea, I hate child sex abusers. I do too. I'm not hate them, but I hate what they do. But I want to tell you right now, this is not something that we can just make light of and say, well, there's no big deal. And no, we can't do that. But also, on the other hand, we have to say, does this person, if they've repented, and that's important, and come to confession, deserve to go to hell for it? We can never say that, and we've got to help people and offer them some kind of, godly, mercy, for these things. So there's a reason we insist on this. This is something bigger than this world and its justice system. This is about God's justice and mercy, and something bigger. All right, now. That doesn't mean that, again, a priest wouldn't, as I would advise people to say, if you committed a serious sin like this, you ought to report yourself. So the first thing is I can't require them to report themselves, but I can, nor can I say anything. But let me also tell you, the law is kind of silly in that I want to say that very few people who come to me with, I've had very few experiences of this, in my own priestly ministry, but I've heard people who've said they've murdered somebody and so on. I've heard those things, but I don't know who they are. It's just a voice behind the screen. I don't even know who they are. So the idea that I'm supposed to go and report them, well, who are they? I don't know. I don't know a thing. And I've always, and by the way, I want to say this to the whole church right now. I think we need to get back to the basic practice of confession we had before the 1970s, which is people come to confession anonymously. Now, there can be occasions where someone comes up to you, Father, would you hear my confession? Or they come to the rectory and ring the doorbell. That's always been the case. But as a general rule, in my own parish, I do not have a reconciliation room where people can walk around the screen and talk to me personally. For my protection as well as theirs, I keep the grill. And not only the grill, but I don't know who they are. I mean, I might be able to occasionally recognize a voice, but I don't know who they are. And I think that's the way that we should get back to this. It protects both the priest, the penitent, and I would argue the sacrament itself. So that it's never good to have the priest know who they are or the penitent to be known. And I think that's something to possibly return to in this case. So anyway, Matthew, what are your thoughts as a confessee?
Well, I 100% agree on the privacy of confession. Not only do I not want the priest to see who I am, but I don't want to really see the personality of the priest. I want to think of myself as talking to Jesus.
Good, make it plain.
And I guess my other thing is, and I don't know if this makes sense, but for me, someone who's coming to confession, they're not coming to brag about abuse that they did.
No.
I'm sure 99.9% of the time they're coming because they're feeling this on their conscience.
Yeah.
They know that they did something wrong, and they want to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I think if you take away that sanctity of the sacred space where people can come and talk about these things and try to make right with God, then you're doing a big disservice to society in general. It's not a counseling session, but there is some benefit of talking to someone who can guide people back to Christ.
Yeah.
So it's really important. And I just think these politicians don't understand the first thing about confession.
No. Yeah.
And I mean, I was really surprised by the numbers of how many voted. And it wasn't like they won by one vote. It was, they clearly had the majority on this. And it's happened in other states, but it kind of like, dies in the House or whatever. But this is, I guess in July is when this is going on the books. So we need to pray about this.
And I fully support the basic, declaration of the bishops. Ignore this law. It's an unjust law. Do not obey it. And we have the, so that stands as, a basic approach. But on the other hand, isn't it funny that in places like Washington State, they want to, let's overlook, marijuana smoking or, physician-assisted suicide, the compassion. And then all of a sudden we're going to zero tolerance, hang them high. So I think somewhere in there, and please understand, I am not, disclaimer central here. I am not saying no big deal about, child sexual abuse. It's a terrible thing. And I think the priest has to be very clear with the penitent that it's likely that you should turn yourself in. But I can't make that the basis of their turning themselves in as a kind of a penance. I can make it as an encouragement. But I can't say that if a person comes to confession, they need to rat themselves out either. I'm concerned about where they're going to spend eternity. Even the worst criminals deserve some room to go to God and say, I really messed up, and I need your mercy. And if you don't believe that, well, Jesus has some things to say about that. He has all kinds of parables and things, so, about mercy and the need for it and turning to God. All right, well, we can't explore that much more, but I will say what we want to do is give you a blessing. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Faith, hope, charity. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network, radio for your soul.